18 months, and I finally then was sent to Denmark, and I escaped out. About 20 months in the Sea Org altogether.
Now, you say you escaped out. I mean, you had to have been quite young then, 12 years old?
I was 12 years old when I got myself out.
What happened?
Well, basically, my father was supposed to come back to the ship, never did. I requested to go join him. It took several months. And when I finally went to Denmark, my father hadn't been there for months. He'd been thrown out, and I devised a method of requesting to go back to England to get an education, so it would make me a better Sea Org member. I couldn't just say, look, I've had enough of this, I want to go. You didn't do that. And it was granted. At the time, I was allowed to go back. But having said that, I did get letters, a year later requesting that I come back immediately or I would have a freeloader's bill.
How much would your freeloader's been at that time? Do you have any idea?
I can't remember. I remember it was in dollars, and there was a lot of numbers. I don't remember the exact figure, but it was in dollars, and it was a lot of money.
Now, for people who don't know what that terminology means, the freeloader thing is basically if you're not working for the group or whatever, they charge you for room and board. Is that what it is, or?
Well, I took it to mean that all the while I'd been in the Sea Org, I'd been given a uniform and fed, and consequently I owed them the money for that. My mother was in Scientology, and I did, in Denmark, I did have the opportunity to go and join her, but she was going to an org in Sweden, and there was absolutely no way I wanted to be in a foreign country, because I just did, by that point, I trusted nobody, not even my own mother. Even though she was, she was my stepmother, and I loved her dearly, but I didn't trust anybody, and I felt, and I had to come back to England to another stepmother that I didn't trust either. But I just kept figuring if I was in my home country, somebody would be able to help me somewhere.
What is the law in England about minors? What were they trying to do legally to get this money for room and board for your indentured service over there on Sea Org? I mean, how do they get away with that?
I don't know how they get away with it. I mean, I just didn't reply. I didn't reply back, and I wasn't. They sent me 2 letters. I wasn't pursued thereafter. Although, having said that, my stepmother in England kept trying to get me to visit her for various reasons. And I did on a couple of occasions, but both were, the last time being when she tried to get me hooked up to an e-meter. And on that particular occasion, I went ballistic, and I threw a fit, and I left, and I never ever went back.
Anybody who escapes a cult, I think, has a very strong character and is a very brave person. But you weren't even 18, I mean, and going through all of this stuff. And that would be the legal capacity in the United States to enter a contract.
It would be in England, too.
Once you escaped, what happened then? I mean, what happened with your family, and were you kind of pursued by some of these shady characters that we've been hearing about with Scientology? That what is the term, Sates, for the people who...
OSA. It used to be called the Guardian's Office, and they hire PIs to follow people around.
So did that happen to you, and what happened to you next, Sharon?
It didn't happen to me that I was, well, not to my knowledge, I was followed by shady characters. However, as I said, my stepmother, whom at that time was married and to all intents and purposes has been her whole life, married to a long-time Sea Org member whom was one of the accountants for Scientology in Great Britain. Mm-hmm. And when it was her wedding, she tried to get me there. She was getting married to him, invited me to the wedding, but by this time I'd had my freeloader's bill sent to me. I'd had requests to come back to the ship, and I was convinced it was a ploy to kidnap me and get me back into the Sea Org, so I never went.
Are these stepmothers still living, or are they not? And what is your relationship with your family, brothers, etc.? Are they still in this church, or are they out of it, or do you even know? With
my first stepmother, the one I classed as mother, and my two stepbrothers. The last I saw of them was in Sweden. I have no idea to this day whether they are still in or not. I've spent the last 6 years trying to find them. My second stepmother, the one that I kind of had to get away from, she's been in Scientology all her life, as has her daughter, which is my half-sister, and also both my half-sister's children, whom I've never met, are all, according to somebody I know, in the Sea Org. For many people, this is very hard to believe, but I assure you it really did happen.
And on the sea, they probably are not subjected to the laws, child abuse laws in Europe or the United States.
One of the reasons Hubbard took to the seas, I think, was because he was able to get away with so many things. And, you know, my story is one of many other children's story from the ship. And it still goes on the free winds today. You know, Valeska Paris and can't think of the other girl's name at the moment, but you know, it wasn't just in the 60s. It's still continuing to this day. And that is what I find very difficult, and which is why I have to keep speaking out.
And I'm glad that you do, because I don't think people realize how bad this really is.
I would just like to think that enough people are informed about what Scientology actually does to their children, and not just to their own children, to other people's children. So many children are affected. One of the biggest things for me at the moment is third world countries, whereby they're going into orphanages and they're teaching children Scientology techniques, the communication courses, PRs and stuff. And I'm sorry, but I just think that is appalling. Absolutely appalling. I want people to write to governments and to make it stop. In Clearwater, Florida, to this day, there's pictures on my website that someone called Darth Vader took video footage of, and a friend of mine on OCMB did the stills for me. There's little kids going through exactly what I went through.
To this day, on land.
On land, in Clearwater, Florida.
What is your website?
It's called the Apollo series, Blogspot.
So how many years has it been then since you've been out of Scientology?
40 now.
Good for you. And do you still, I mean, obviously you're an activist and, you know, and letting people know about your story. A lot of characteristics that people have talked about as a result of being in this cult is that they still suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome, nightmares, that kind of thing. Has that been your experience, or are you pretty clear of it?
No, it periodically something manifests itself, and I haven't. When I first started looking back into my past, I suffered for about a year with dreadful nightmares. This was, 6 years ago when I first embarked on this, going back and trying to do something about it. I haven't had bad dreams for some time, but last week I did, but I think that was because I'd been talking to various people, and some stuff had kind of come to mind that I hadn't thought about for years and years and years. I've just recently had somebody send me some pictures of my childhood. I had no pictures of my childhood, and they were found in an attic, and they've been there since 1975, and so that's brought back some, you know, that's my little brothers, and that's brought back quite a lot of anxiety, shall we say.
What did you find worked for you? Was there a certain type of therapy that year that you spent working to heal what had gone on? What was beneficial? I think that would be good for other people to know. Beneficial.
Working my way through it. Because I suddenly found myself faced with this all again, and having to, it was a case of hitting it head on, and it, don't get me wrong, it's been very, very hard. I've gone through some very difficult times, but I wouldn't have it any other way. To me, that is the only way forward, is to, you know, get rid of this shit. Let other people know what you've gone through. And it's amazing how many other people have gone through exactly the same thing. And I think the more you do talk about it, the more you open up the possibilities for other people to heal.
I agree with that. Thank you both for your time this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.